OSHA has cited 3 companies for nearly $250,000 after its investigation found 6 people at a dairy farm in Keensburg died last August from exposure to hazardous gas. Joining us now is our legal expert, Whitney Traylor, to talk a little bit more about this. When we talk about OSHA, it's Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
Yes.
So what does this citation mean?
Yeah. I'm glad we're talking about this because, as I said on the break, this is administrative law, and this is a major part of our American jurisprudence system. And actually, a lot of people say it's the fourth branch of government. So we know it's the executive, legislative, and judicial, and then all the administrative regulations. So here, what this is, as you said, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and they said, hey, you violated these, various health codes. And so they hit them with an administrative fine. And now the companies can, of course, appeal it, or they can pay the fine. Now that administrative process is on its way.
I think viewers at home will hear about OSHA when we hear on the news talk about, an issue where OSHA has to get involved. But how common are these kind of citations? And also, I think when you hear 6 people perished,
yes.
$250,000,
right.
Doesn't
Is that
seem
low?
like
Is it high?
enough.
Yeah.
That seems low. No, that's a great point. It does seem low, and OSHA is very active. I mean, most people would think about OSHA in the restaurant context, so they have rules like, no open-toed shoes in the kitchen, these kind of things. And then, of course, they govern construction sites. So it's not unusual for OSHA to come in and cite these types of violations with respect to this kind of dairy plant, if you will. And I agree with you that seems low, but of course these are the administrative penalties, and they may stand, they may not, but these are not private claims by the families of the deceased folks.
Because when you think about this, these are 5 men and a high school student that
Yes.
died. It was just a terrible story
Yes.
when we reported on. So will they all together get the same attorneys or go off on their own, depending on whatever, and then sue all 3 companies?
That's a great question, and that's really civil litigation. That's a strategy. So there may be some lawyers that are trying to get all of those folks as clients, and they might go with the same lawyer, or they could have different lawyers. And one of the strategies would be, all right, do we go after them collectively, or do we file these individual lawsuits? And then, of course, this happened on the job site, so there's workers' compensation type issues. So they may have to go through the workers' comp process, but so they could get the same lawyer, or they all have individual lawsuits.
So when you hear $250,000 worth of citations, that's citations for the company. It's not money that the families could get. That comes, as you mentioned, and as Kim just pointed out, in litigation.
Yes.
Put your defense attorney hat on for half a second.
Okay.
How do these companies defend themselves against something like this?
Right, and it'll be interesting. So they'll do their investigation and they'll turn out facts. But the companies, the issue is if they're deemed to have violated these OSHA standards, that could be used in later litigation. So they may fight it, basically, and they might fight it with a number of things. They'll say, hey, OSHA has to prove that we created the hazard, that we completely controlled the work site, that we exposed the workers, and we had responsibility to correct the hazard. So they're going to say, OSHA, you have to prove that. So they may point to, this is the blame game in litigation.
That's exactly it. They're going to point to somebody else.
They're going to say, oh, it was the manufacturer of the pipes, or it was, all these different things. And this is why we call it complex civil litigation, because to determine that, to go to trial and actually determine that, a jury has to sort through all these experts and all this information to really get at who was responsible. And it could be multiple parties, not just one party.
And at the end of the day, let's not forget, as everybody's pointing the finger, there are families in the middle of all of this who lost loved ones.
Yes, and that's the tragedy, and that's why litigation, I always tell folks, get your estate planning stuff together, because at the worst times, right, this is the worst time they're going through this grieving process, and now they may have to litigate it, or they may have to try and sort out where documents are. And so it's a little tangential to talk about estate planning, but it is still relevant because these types of things happen.
Yeah, and what is a profession that can be very dangerous. All
Right, yep.
Thank you, Whitney.
Sure.